That's why when we stopped taking risks as artists. The whole thing began to go down because once they noticed that they could get away with doing what worked. Because the I think it was basically on the 80s that they started to develop a little bit of a formula to what worked. Before that was all over the place.
Yes.
You got great stuff, you got very, very bad stuff, sometimes coming from the same artist.
Yeah. We're gonna do David Bowie.
and it was part of the process. Yeah. David Bowie is a great example of that because he was a tremendous risk taker for the good and for the bad. And he actually left an imprint on the entire industry. He changed the whole thing.
Yeah.
He changed the game out of what he did good and out of what he did bad.
Yeah.
Because he was actually experimenting quite a lot, and it was 100% part of his charm.
Yep. Yeah, and we respect that.
Yeah, like Prince is another great example of that.
Prince.
The Beatles, may I point out the Beatles?
The Beatles, yeah, you're right. Even the Beatles themselves, a good chunk of what we do today comes out of the creativity. When it comes to the technical aspect of making a record, comes from the exploration and expanding nature of the mindset during the production of the seminal records by the Beatles. Mm-hmm. Because a good chunk of the techniques used nowadays comes out of what they did back in the day. Just think about that. What we give for granted, it was innovative, and it was that groundbreaking that it became the standard.
Yeah. And even the standard for what not to do, since they were experimenting, they did like the stuff like throwing the bass to one side, the drums to another. It's stuff that is sacrilegious nowadays, basically.
Yeah.
But since it was entirely new at the time, they had the guts to actually try it.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff, a lot of the stuff they did actually worked very well, and that's why they are still so respected up until this day, and they deserve it.
100%.
But they also they failed badly at times as well.
Yeah, but it's part of the charm.
It is.
Now the question is this: what do you think happening next?
That's a good question. I will allow myself to be hopeful. Actually, I do think we're kind of coming to the beginning of a new cycle.
Yes.
Yes, and I do see it with as a great thing. I think we are kind of getting way too fed up with what we're getting, and I see that as a wonderful thing. I think we tolerated shit.
Yeah, no, we're long enough.
Yeah, we tolerated crap for way too long, and we allowed it to become the standard.
Yes.
But I think now people are starting to raise their standards once again.
Yes.
It's only the beginning of this process. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I do see it improving. And by people demanding more quality out of the artists and out of the productions and the artists will have to adapt.
Yeah, I would just make a little bit of an extension there.
Yeah.
Because I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, but go for it.
Just that particular point at the end, people. I don't think it's people as a whole. We're getting clusters of people starting to be fed up.
Yes.
Because if there is a sentiment that I would use to define the current state of affairs is I'm mad as hell and I won't take it anymore. Because people, not necessarily speaking, are aware of what's wrong. They simply are up to here with it.
Yeah.
And little by little, out of that anger, they are realizing what's wrong. And I think little by little, people will realize that, wait a second, my music sounds like ass.
At this point, we just want music that doesn't suck.
Yeah, that's why even that title is awesome, and I love it so much because I don't care if it's good. For as long as it doesn't suck, it's already a good starting point. And we are in that point in history. It's the fed up stage. From here onwards, we're gonna develop this whole debacle into something less terrible and later good. Mm-hmm. And for example, there is a huge development when it comes to people buying physical media. Mm-hmm. It's starting to see a resurgence. Even if you don't have to trust me in this one. Do your own research, and you're going to see that even CD sales are starting to ramp up again after 20 years of going down. Yeah. And vinyl in particular has been the most successful, even cassette tapes, man.
But I don't get cassettes because
being here, they sound awful. But there's nostalgia. But they do have they do some, that's a terrible format.
Yeah, because there's an argument to be made about vinyl, but
no vinyl,
cassettes?
But cassette sounds awful, man, and it has everything wrong with everything about cassettes is awful. Change my mind, It's always scientifically proven. So, but the nostalgia factor is there, and from what I have seen. I tend to spend a little bit of time whenever I have chance doing some research. Well, as a musician, I want to find inspiration on what's going on. Mm-hmm. So I want to understand the state of affairs in the mindset of the audience, the people, right? And I've been doing some research on how Gen Z is developing their own outlook regarding the world. And if I were to summarize it in one word, is disdain. I wouldn't use indifference. It's some form of disdain. They're like, I don't care and I don't like it. And there is a resurgence, and I have pointed out to you several times, on Gen Z spending time and money on retro video games. Why? Because they are discovering why video games are as big as they are right now. Because if they were like this 10 years ago, no, 20 years ago when this was real, the industry would have crashed and we would have forgot the whole concept of video games. It's basically living on life support right now, out of nostalgia. It's just pure nostalgia, man. So those younger generations are finding the great stuff. And there is one thing. How do you get access to those? Physical copies, right?
Yeah.
So they are looking for those physical copies, or if you are, you know how to use emulators, well, bad.
High seas and
High
stuff.
seas and stuff, but there are ways. That's life. There are ways. But they are discovering those. The same happens with CDs. Because, for example, I'm on a crusade now on buying my entire music collection. Why? Because one day at the gym, I wanted to listen to freaking Journey. To Journey.
Not even something obscure.
Not even obscure.
Journey.
Freaking Journey. Yeah. I couldn't because the rights, the owner of the distribution rights for my region did something messy. And Journey, that particular track, as the freaking Lonely from Frontier, the most freaking successful album by Journey, is not available. Because Frontier is not there. Why? Because reasons, greedy people messing around with the rights. And that was the last straw. At that point, like, I own nothing. And I am happier than my... where did I have heard that before? Sorry for shouting, but... So, physical media is making a comeback. And with that comes appreciation for the craft. So, I see, outside of the typical slop genres, and you know who I'm talking about and what kind of genres I'm referring to, we're going to start to see a resurgence of this pursuit of uniqueness in sound. Why? Stranger Things is releasing the next season.
Is it?
Yeah. I know. Totally off the bat, right? But what do I mean with this is that Stranger Things, why is it successful? It's not because of the TV show, man. It's the aesthetics.
The 80s.
It's the 80s.
Yeah.
It's everything about it. Even the filming style, even the show itself is ripping off the Goonies and freaking E.T. Everything is 80s like. So it comes with music.
Yeah.
How many people discovered Metallica? But good old Metallica, thanks to that show.
Yeah.
Last season. Kate Bush somehow returned
Like
Palpatine and became a hit for a while. Why? Because Stranger Things. And what do they have in common? Master of Puppets, for as awesome as it is not a great sounding record. It's not punchy. It's their lesser is when they didn't have that. It has that sound from that era, which is far from being good.
It is good. It's just not the super polished one.
It's not the ultra polished one.
Yeah.
And all of those kids who discovered Metallica through that song instead of what every 90s kid discovered Metallica through, which was the Black Album, are developing the idea of metal out of that sound. So exactly what happened when the Swedish death metal scene took place, sounding like wasps. Do you know why? Because the bands that were producing those records back in the mid 90s,
All independent productions.
and the worst of the worst,
Yeah.
and they had access to the worst the equipment they got, man.
Yeah.
So everything was the terrible heavy metal pedal song, metal song. Not the metal song, it's the heavy metal, man. It's even older than the metal song. A pedal. It's not a terrible pedal, but they didn't have the means to record it, so it sounds like that.
Yeah.
And it became the sound of the genre, man.
Yeah, it became an aesthetic.
It's aesthetic.
Yeah.
Because, just listen to Burzum, I'm like, damn, the music is about damn. Wow.
Yeah, but the quality of the audio, of the sound, it started to be attributed to the quality of the music, and and a very interesting
hodgepodge happenstance. Euro catastrophe happens. And I think the same is going to happen with this, because old records have been discovered.
Yeah,
Fleetwood Mac, thanks to freaking Marvel, became popular again, and not the more recent stuff. It's the old stuff.
Yeah.
So you got a generation that grew up with the Chain. And even though it might be a remaster, it has sound. It's not sound. It doesn't sound like any insert blonde chick pretend to be singing in front of an audience.
Yeah,
totally not manufactured. It sounds like Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna see a revival not far away from today, man. Because this new generation of musicians, this new generation of music producers, who got introduced to Fleetwood Mac in the mid 2010s, are now adults.
Yeah.
No longer kids. So, you see where I'm going?
Yeah.
We're out of the woods almost. Finally.
And look, Josh, you're saying we're ready for a revolution in music.
Yes.
And it's happening.
Yeah.
It's happening already.
It's already happening. Yeah.